Next up, we have Sid. Mr. Sid is from iTrust, with a very futuristic outlook of learning on concepts of decentralized learning movements like DSI, decentralized science, deschooling, decentralized autonomous organizations. Don't ask me what they are because I don't really know what they are. And Sid is a research associate, and he is working on a number of very exciting and happening educational projects. I think that's not his main work, but it's out of his passion. And Sid doesn't want to show himself, I think. Okay.
No, I'm in the metaverse. It's not that I want to show myself. So yeah, that's what I wanted to start my presentation with. Like the entire thing about doing one thing or learning just one field is going away, and more students are figuring out to work in different fields and then figure out what they want to do. So the tooling at this point is at the right moment where they can live such a life, where they can learn from many different places because of the internet. And that's what my presentation would be about. So I'll just start sharing my screen. And I would really like to thank Nacha and Dhatu especially for the previous talk, because that is the perfect setting for what I'm going to talk about. So let's get started. Yeah, Nacha, just can you confirm if you can see my screen properly?
Yes, I can. Yes.
Okay.
I can see. Yep.
Awesome. So yeah, this talk is about learning in the metaverse. And I proposed the title of this talk before Facebook just went away and choked the word meta itself. So I have very strong feelings towards what that means. Like one company monopolizing the word, which is as common as meta. So I will be talking about metaverse, and most of you answered that in one of the free Jew sessions that Nacha had hosted. So the talk is about the state of the art in cyber physical education. So that comes from my experience in all these fringe communities which are emerging and which haven't reached the mainstream society yet. So to talk about society itself, I have to give a fair warning that this is going to be slightly futuristic. Like if you don't see it in your classroom today, you shouldn't be shouldn't be brushing it off, because the students are going back to their dorm rooms and learning this way anyway. So it's important to understand what they are doing so that we can adapt our education according to them, because that's how society has always evolved. So society can be broadly be divided into 4 pillars. And I think Dhatu went into many of these aspects in his talk of gamification. So society is technology, economics, policy, and culture, all affecting each other in different ways. So you can imagine it as a complex system where the technology is generally invented first, then people begin to monetize it somehow because there's a profit to be extracted from it. And then the culture affects as a change and people start adopting it. And finally, policy makers and regulators catch up to the fact that it's becoming a new normal. And that has been what's happening since the last year. Ever since COVID-19 just accelerated most of the revolutions in the world. And education has gone through a significant evolution, and that's what I'll talk about. So a brief introduction, and I think this is a good point to do a face reveal. So I'll just remove this metaversal filter. Hi, everyone, again. So my name is Sid. I go by Sid on the internet. I work here and more people on the internet. And if you go to saying, you will more about what I do. So Aditya, and he gives me a lot of freedom to explore these different areas, which makes it relevant for me to talk about these topics in the first place. So my experience is in a few fields. Like I've been dabbling around. It has been in space organizations. There's a
Sid, your voice is breaking away. Okay, I think you need to go back into your avatar. It's like either your avatar or your voice. So I think something happened. There was overload. I think his non-metaverse voice is breaking. Yes.
I think he's consumed by the meta world.
Okay, he will try to come back in. Let us wait for that. Now, while he's doing that, let me take this opportunity to share with you an exciting thing. This is our pedagogy magazine. You're back? Okay. So I cannot share my exciting thing yet. Okay, go ahead, Sid.
So I'm connected with my phone right now, so it shouldn't be an issue. May I continue?
Yes, please.
Okay. I was giving a brief background, and my most recent stint was at a decentralized autonomous organization, and I'm figuring out these new organizational and educational structures which are emerging in society. So my main work is in cyber physical security, in which I have to explain and educate policymakers in different fields about how to keep calm, do cyber exercises, and learn about their systems in a very engaging manner. So one way of doing that is to build actual physical test beds. And we have an example in the form of SWAT, or Secure Water Treatment Test Bed, on Building 2 Level 7, which lets people play with this cyber physical system, either remotely at home or with a physical test bed. So this has been the state of the world since the last 50 or 100 years of pedagogy. But now it's finally changing. And we have fully educational institutes. Like I'm a part of a fellowship called Kernel, which is trying to build the next wave of the web. And we explore a lot of things. So it's very related to the emerging crypto technology ecosystem as well. And we are exploring how to build trusted communal web spaces beyond just financial applications, what crypto is famous for. And education is a big thing in that. And I'll talk about why. So simulation and education has gone hand in glove for a long time, as many talks have explained. My first experience with that was to build a simulation in a Mars city project in my Google Summer of Code project. So this was the state back then. You had very clunky hardware, and that's what it worked on, like Kinect, just tracking your body and transferring it to a robot. And then we had this new wave of web-based education and learning management systems over the last decade, in which you see apps like this being used frequently in the classroom. And 2021 onwards, you are seeing companies coming up with their own metaverses, like Facebook and Microsoft and so on. With the presence of holographic technology and so on. So I'll just briefly start with what is the metaverse, since that was a nagging question throughout the session on the free Jew side. So firstly, what is the metaverse? Why should we study it? Because everyone seems to have their own view of the metaverse, as we saw from the answers. And only by combining multiple subjective perspectives, we can get closer to conceive the objective whole. So the metaverse word comes from a science fiction book from the 90s called Snow Crash. It means beyond our physical universe. The word meta is a Greek word which means beyond, and that's what it meant. So it has a few characteristics which are very important for educational goals. Firstly, it's persistent. Just like you can walk into SUTD and just be assured that the next day it will still be SUTD and not convert into some other place. A metaverse has to be persistent, and your presence there has to be persistent. It has to be synchronous and in line with the time events that take place. Like you cannot just go back one semester if you attend SUTD a week late. Or things like that. You have to be in a synchronous medium with everyone. It has to be uncapped, just like the physical world. Just like you don't you don't put yourself under restrictions. Okay, this is the maximum bounds in SUTD that I can reach. So yeah, that's all I can do. That is what education. Like even the MOOCs and other platforms, they don't let you explore and express your like creativity in the fullest possible way. and metaverses are personalized. They have an economic, financial system in place to ensure that it's a functioning society. It's cyber physical, which means it exists in the virtual world as well as the digital world. It is interoperable. This is very important because the students of tomorrow will not be just studying in one centralized university. They will be taking one course from one university, partnering with 10 different universities, then working at the same time. So we have to ensure that the future of education and work is interoperable, and the technology is there to support that. So your credentials that you earn from one university have to be transferable as well as acceptable in all these places. And lastly, it has to be collaborative. So your physical location should not be a barrier to like collaborating with a person or a student in Africa or the US or the European countries or so on. So if you want to learn more about it, there's a famous primer called the Metaverse Primer, which goes through all these things in particular and why it makes sense to develop such things right now. So I won't go into the details of the Metaverse. I'll just jump directly into the learning aspects of it. And why do I call education as the new coordination frontier? Because education is jumping out of the classroom from small cohorts to these big batches that we have seen in MOOC classes for the last few years. But we saw that MOOCs never really got that much success as they were promised to give to the world. There's a reason for that. And now the tooling is finally in place to have a new coordination frontier. And when I talk about cyber physical campuses, I think that attempts like the Minecraft campus by SUTD students is a great first step, but that is a vision, that is not the ultimate manifestation of where we want to be. So thanks to COVID, all teachers are now Twitch streamers, and everyone has to figure out different forms of social media to engage with their students, including emerging platforms like TikTok and Instagram, which was not a thing for the last many years. So kids nowadays are digital internet native. They spend more times on platforms like Roblox, and they would rather spend time in the physical space. They are naturally attuned to this world, as Dhatu's talk mentioned. Like they're intrinsically motivated to spend time in this space because it's just more free and liberating than the physical world for them. So there are models emerging which let you play, learn, and earn. And we have to be very careful and intentional about how we build these. So yeah, we as the creators of the next wave of the web have very intentional. Do credentials matter a lot? Should your credentials be recorded? Should we account for proof of curiosity, proof of learning, or proof of credential hoarding, which we see on platforms like LinkedIn? So how do we avoid the pitfalls of the last wave of the web and enter a very intentional, curiosity-driven world, which rewards genuine teachers and genuine learners and matches them with good employment opportunities as well? So the reason I talk about platforms like Roblox is that the numbers and the economics just make sense. You can see the network effect start kicking in. Like Roblox has been around since 2008 and 2009, but only in the last years, despite the pandemic, much before the pandemic, it has become a virtual world in itself. And it has 3.5 billion monthly hours of playtime. And this excludes YouTube and Twitch viewing, which is a major part of education in itself. So this makes the current batch of learners the relay generation, as I like to call them. Like we are the last batch which know what physical books meant, what paper books really implied, and how did we learn from them. So we grew from the analog world to the digital world, and the next wave of learners will not have an idea of most of these forms of media. So that is upon us now to make better forms of media that is more internet native and not just copy the artifacts from the previous world. So that has been a case with most of the online platforms. They try to bring skeuomorphic elements, that is, copy a classroom centralized model like one teacher, multiple students, and all those models that have worked in the Montessori system for the last many years. So where are we right now? So yeah, we started with collecting rocks, and it seems that this year we are back to collecting digital artifacts, and this will extend to education. So just in case you're wondering what this right piece of rock is, that is an ether rock that is valued at more than $1 million right now. And that's a separate topic on why that is, but I'll talk about why that is relevant to education. So it's relevant to the evolution of the web in the first place. So educational platforms evolved from nothing to read only in the first few years of the web to read and write, where students could engage on YouTube and with MOOCs and learning management systems. And the next wave of the web is read, write, and also like own pieces of educational content on the web. That explodes the realm of possibilities. And that has also messed up with our minds to a large extent. So in 1900, our primary form of education and entertainment was books, plays, and journals. 1950s, we had television, radio, and movies come about. 1980s, video games, computers, and Walkmans. 2000s, emails, texting, and the internet. 2010s, we had Web 2.0, social media, and smartphones. And the next wave is Web 3. And all of these have played a part in education. And we are always trailing back behind a few years when it comes to bringing it to universities. But I'm glad that SUTD at least has a vision of a cyber-physical campus, which is a futuristic start to get things planned and started. And I think Web3 will play a huge role in that. So that is because as these media forms evolve, we also start forgetting more. Learning Sciences Lab has presented and talked about this at length, but there's a forgetting curve, especially with digital forms of media. This was true for older forms of media, but increasingly so with the new forms of media, like learning on YouTube or Instagram, for example. So how do we combine these different forms of physical and cyber educational media in better ways? In short, how do we create mnemonic media, like media which helps us understand and remember things? So the last wave of the web, last 10 years, have been about the attention economy, like how much attention do viewers pay to the video and how much advertising dollars do the learners and teachers get out of it. The next wave has to be designed around retention economy. And that is what people like me are trying to build. The forgotten curve is real, and that has consequences. So the future of education by different people in the space is not homeschooling. It's not boot camps or cohort-based courses or some extreme step. It will be some of universities, some of homeschooling, but on the whole, it will be proof of learning. Like, how do you learn on the job through micro tasks? How do you credentialize learning on the job as the same as learning in a classroom? And how do you build this resume not with the intention of just getting a job, but actually pursuing your curiosity? And how do you earn your stake and ownership and stewardship in the networks as you learn? To summarize, how can we develop these transformative tools for thought? So two learners in this space are Andy and Michael, which have designed lots of standards to improve upon internet native media. Like, how do you have advanced interactions while reading? How do you do augmented citing? How do you enable computational text that can change interactively? How do you have legacy safe but free and open formats? And how do you give access to the students and teachers to build these things? So they pioneered with a course called Quantum Country, which was a free introduction to quantum computing and quantum mechanics, presented in a new mnemonic medium with flashcards, spaced repetition, and all the recent experiments in this field. So it all came down to the Feynman technique that teaching is the best way to learn. And you need to have some transformative tool for thought as we step into this metaversal world where we will get distracted if we don't pay attention. So that is because student retention rate is different for different forms of media. And that is what SUTD tries to experiment with different forms of classroom learning as well. So you can see that passive learning and active learning have very different retention rates. And the trend right now is towards discussions, practice, learn by doing, and teaching others. So I'll explain a few edtech companies which are trying to do that. So this is an example from BuildSpace. So in this classroom form of education, you are put in a Discord server. You learn by making stuff. You literally learn by making things, and there is no detailed lecture or anything. And there are virtual co-working sessions, unique project guides. The classroom is held on Twitch and Discord. And that is the secret to a better memory and also employment opportunities and research opportunities in the long run. Then how do you ensure active recall and spaced repetition? So all these edtech like upstarts and startups are trying to like complain about existing forms of education, which is kind of a problem. Like this is from Synthesis, in which they talk about the skills to invent the future are not taught in school, like the idea of collaborating, embracing complexity, testing assumptions, expecting course corrections, like reflecting and having no limits on by age group and by credentials. So they're trying to challenge the norms of existing forms of education to cater to the new form of the world. So they're trying to build a balance between being a generalist explorer and a focused specialist. So that is because these are two different loops. Like school traditionally has taught us to follow certain instructions, and real world has a different way of learning. How do we combine these two to match the incentive structures of students as well, so that they don't have to play two different games? And that's what the future of education should be. And games have taught us a concept called flow, which all gamers very strongly relate to, and that was covered in Dhatu's talk about intrinsic motivation. And gamified learning has its own challenges, as he mentioned, but we can learn a lot from having the right set of flow without giving dopamine hits to the students. And secondly, the financial aspect or the economic aspect of learning is also changing due to the new wave of the web. And all these platforms propose that a degree shouldn't put either teachers or learners into debt. They should incentivize them. And they call this the people-powered education and similar names like that. So these are free educational media which have social learning and data-driven degrees. And Khan Academy or Sal Khan, if some of you know him, are inspired by that. So they started a live tutoring model with schoolhouse.world, and like it has been widely popular since the last year, as you can see from these numbers. It's a free tutoring website where you can sign up as a tutor and teach a small class. So now I'll talk about a few other forms of media. Like there's communities like StudyGram, or the community-based form of learning, where you have more than 13,000 students. Most universities can't match that. And they are always learning. And I'll show you a live example. So there are sessions like Study With Me, in which people just pop up their video streams and everyone just studies together in a silent room or asks each other doubts and so on. And we have been experimenting with this at iTrust as well, while teaching high schoolers who come to iTrust for a short educational stint. And you can see that the future of educational universities can look like a Discord server, as you can see from the right-hand side. You have all these different faculty departments, and everyone asks questions. They share the best resources, best lobangs, and just get work done. Like students are figuring out these forms of education, and I think teachers are also picking it up. So the whole point of the talk comes down to these three like pillars: that you need better content and pedagogy in the form of mnemonic media. You need to have a community and network of learners. And right now you can do that thanks to the internet and Web3, in which you can own things and have better business models that are not around attention-seeking behavior, but rather than retention, intention, curiosity, and play. So here's to a cyber-physical campus. And if you want to talk further, I'm Sidcode on Telegram, Sidcode 9999 on Discord, and you can just reach out to me. Thanks a lot.
Thanks so much, Sid. It's a lot of information, and it's packed with a lot of information. We need a different session altogether. In view of time, I'm actually there is a question for you from Subbu. So if you could take it offline, and if you can chat on the site, I'm going to invite Prof. A because he needs to leave as well on time.
Sure.
So
yeah,
I
sure.
would, yep. Thanks,
I'll
Sid.
take it.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'll stop my share. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.